Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of flyover country in the heartland of America, the Kansas City on the other side of the mighty Mo. Welcome to Hittin the Bricks with Kathleen, a genealogy show that features your questions and her answers. I am John, your humble hubby host, and on this episode we'll be going off the wall to make sense of the U.S. Census. So let's start hitting the bricks. Okay, so this is another episode of Off the Wall, and I've interrupted Kathleen on a regular work day in order for her to answer some questions about the census for Off the Wall. And so we're making sense of the census. And so I have a few questions. And these are my personal questions. These are ones that I've come across in doing my minimal research. So are you ready for the lightning round, Kathleen?
We'll see.
Okay. All right. The first question I have is, when was the first U.S. Census taken?
Well, the U.S. federal census, the first one was 1790, but remember there were a lot of census before that. Matter of fact, as early as like 1624, there were what they called musters, and they did the same purpose as the census, and that is to take an account of the inhabitants within the United States or in the territory.
And I'm assuming that was for whoever was colonizing. So that would be for the British, for us.
At that point, those records are actually British records. Yes, the early ones, the pre-colonial. Okay.
All right. So let me jump all the way to today. Why is the census important today?
For the same reason it was yesteryear, and that is to take an account of the inhabitants that are living in the United States. And with that number, that's how you decide how your representatives, what the states will get as far as budget money from the federal government. All of that is the same reason it was before. So the purpose of the census is really constitutional. It doesn't really change. What changes is only the questions on the census.
Okay, so here's one I came across. This was in one of our podcasts that I learned this, but I'm going to ask it again just because I think it's really important to reiterate. And is a census a primary or a secondary source?
It is a primary source, it is a secondary source, and it can be a tertiary source.
Okay.
So
I thought it was a secondary source.
It's a secondary source based on your questions. So it's not the document that determines the source, it's the information you're looking at.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if you're looking to find out who was the census taker and what county and what was the date, then it's primary because that information was known. We know who wrote it. We know that there is a census person who actually wrote down these facts. But if you're looking for a name, a spelling, a birth year, then it's secondary. Okay. We really don't know if it was accurate. It needs to be corroborated. And we don't really know who gave it, who was the informant, except in the 1940 census. So,
okay. So why in the 1940 census?
Well, in the 1940 census, the instructions to the census taker was, please designate with an X that is encircled, an X that is encircled, and that is the person who gave you the information in the household. Now,
interesting. Okay.
That's only in the 1940. It was voted out or not chosen to keep in the 1950s.
When I'm researching, what should I keep in mind while using a U.S. Census for research? And that was a big one that came up in my research and somebody else's too, I think.
Well, this might not have come up in yours, but if you had the question of the population of a town, and if it was an early census, you have to remember that Native Americans were not all Native Americans, actually most Native Americans were not accounted for, and that African Americans were slaves, or ex-slaves rather. They were considered 3/5 of a person. So if you're looking for population, you need to watch that.
So I'm gonna jump to a question. Were slaves ever enumerated on a census?
Yes, they were, but they were enumerated on what's called the slave schedules in 1850 and 1860.
Okay, so what are the slave schedules then? Obviously,
they were not necessarily given by name. However, there are times that we will see them by name, just depending on how it was done by that census taker. That slave schedule went by the slave holder. So the slave holder would name all of the enslaved persons that he was accountable for and give their age, their complexion color pretty much, and boy, girl, their gender.
And so now I'm going to jump back to a question about the informant. And is there any information given on the informant on a census, or let's say on a slave schedule?
You do get the name of the informant. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to know more about the informant, you do your genealogy research for that informant. And there are times that we have to do that. We also want to know sometimes, are they related to the people in a household for a particular reason? Maybe because the names are spelled in a particular way, or there might be a question of who the informant was. So there are times we look up the informant.
Well, I don't know.
You don't know what?
I don't know. I just forgot. All right. So, where can I find? We were talking about slave schedules. Where can I find a slave schedule? Because I don't think I've ever seen one on Ancestry.
They're on Ancestry.
Are they? Okay.
Yes, you could just Google them. Now, one of the things that are not used a lot and they should be used all the time, mm-hmm. both in Ancestry, family search, mm-hmm. is their catalogs. So in Ancestry, there's a catalog. If you go to that and you just put in under keyword slave schedules, then you can just click on it there. But people forget that it's a wonderful tool to get you to exactly what you're looking for.
I wasn't even aware. Well, it doesn't mean anything that I wasn't aware. It's not like I'm buried in research all the time. So me not being aware is not a major thing. I'm typically unaware. Which
brings me to the point that you need to continue your research.
Yes, I'll continue my research on awareness.
No, not on awareness.
Okay, so here's one of the questions. You made a big deal about this a while back. So what's with tick marks and why are they so important?
People don't like doing the early genealogy census. Before 1850, we only had tick marks, and we had the homeowner or the household, the head of the household was the one that was enumerated, and everyone else was just tick marks, someone between 10 to 19, 20 to 29, that sort of thing. And there's just these columns with no names. You know that there's children in there. You might even know that there were slave persons, or there's someone who might have been a parent just based on the age bracket that they fell under. On the other hand, people who use it well, they can actually use it for brick walls, like I do all the time. You can figure out, based on the tick mark census, sometimes a father-son combination, especially if he didn't show up in 1820, but he does show up in 1830, another person under that name, the father's name. So you can actually help with uniting families that way.
Okay, but what are tick marks?
Oh, it's just a check mark. It's just a check mark in one of the columns. No names.
Okay, so it's a blank column and then there's a tick mark somewhere in it.
Yes, so I would mark you under 60 to 69. But your name's not there. You would just be in the household
of tick mark. There was somebody there who's between the ages of 60 and 69.
Yes, but if you were not the head of the household has the name.
Would it matter if I had a different name, if I wasn't related to them? If I was
No,
a
it
boarder?
does not matter.
That
We
seems
would not
like
know.
Does that not seem like it's really inaccurate?
Well, sometimes there's blended families in there. Immigrants might come and stay with their relatives. So it's not unusual.
No, but doesn't it just seem really inaccurate?
It's called analysis.
It's well, yeah, you have to analyze it, but doesn't the process of using tick marks, I'm sorry, but I'm not letting the census people off on this. If I'm a tick mark, then how do you know who is actually there other than a guess that somebody would be about the same age at the same time?
So remember what I have done before I get to the tick mark census.
No.
I've already done research from present day back. So when I get to the 1850s, I know who should be in a household in the 1840s.
Right.
So when I get into the 1840s, if you were 19 in 1850, you should be about 9, and there should be a tick mark for a boy under this parent's name in 1840.
Right.
So I can identify if I have the right family or not. Let's say I am looking for this 9-year-old boy in 1840, and I'm looking at 3 Sam Thompsons, but only one of the Samuel Thompsons has a 9-year-old.
Okay.
So now I know that that's probably my right Samuel Thompson, and I can concentrate on that census record.
Well, I'm just going to say that tick marks seem to be, I'm sorry, that's lazy.
They are a wonderful tool.
That is lazy reporting. If you can't write down the name of the people who are in the house, I just don't know what to do.
Remember why we're doing the census. It's not to write down the names of people, but keep an account of the people and know the head of the household.
Well, you, madam, and
taxes.
I will agree to disagree on this point, and I will move forward to the next extraordinary question that everybody wants to know the answer to. And what is up with the 1890 census?
Nothing is up with it. It went down. The 1890 census was more, we will say it was burned in a fire.
Okay. All of them?
No, but they weren't burned in a fire. They were really destroyed in the flood, taking out the fire where they were being held. They were in a basement, in a fireproof basement where someone didn't close a door.
Seriously?
Yes.
Where?
So they were in DC. It wasn't at the Census Bureau because it wasn't there yet.
Right.
It was in one of the Commerce buildings, I think. And
was it in a former president's bathroom, or
No, John, it wasn't. It was in the basement.
It was in the basement. Well, okay.
And in that basement also had a lot of other things that could burn, like the furnace.
Sure.
So they did not properly close the fire door.
Wow.
It was because of that, when the firemen came in, the water went in, destroyed most of the 1890 census. You must know, though, that there are some fragments left from different states. Like Texas has maybe 200 people in Texas that year. I don't know how many actually was salvaged.
Seems a little low.
Yeah, well, exactly. So,
but they have tick marks. They could be tick marks.
Well, actually, believe it or not, the 1890 census was different than all of the others. It actually took a family on a separate sheet. So it had information by family on every sheet. But only like 6,000, I think, in the whole nation was covered.
This is very conspiracy theory. I think we have a new direction to go here.
Here we go.
We could definitely, where's Angie Radesky? We need a conspiracy theory built around the disappearance of the 1890 census. Okay, I
do have one more thing to say about the 1890.
Go ahead.
There are other ways that we recover the information.
What do I do if I really need an 1890 census?
Well, you don't really ever need any of the census, but there are state census. Some states have state census on the 5-year. The Native American, the Indian Territory in Oklahoma, they had their own 1890 census. If you were in certain enumeration districts in certain territory land, then you were still enumerated in the 1890s. There are tax records that we use for 1890s. There's a lot of substitutes.
Okay. What would be the number one myth of the U.S. Census that most impacts genealogical research?
There's an 1870 wall when we're doing slave research or research on previously enslaved people.
Right.
Because in 1870, they were, of course, enumerated, but in 1860, they weren't because they're only on the slave schedule as mulatto boy 9.
Okay.
I have a problem with the defeated statement that that's a brick wall because we already know census records are only so accurate. They're not definitive anyway. They need to be corroborated anyway. So I think there's a lot more we can do instead of.
So you're saying a lot of times in doing certain research that it's an artificial brick wall to say that we're stuck on this particular census when you shouldn't be relying necessarily on the census to that degree anyway. Thus the conversation about tick marks.
And thank you so much for putting that in English for me, because that is exactly what I was trying to say.
Well, I'm just making sure that I understand what you're trying to say, because that, after 25 years, is my job.
And you're doing well, my love.
Okay, so
the other issue the other myth is that it has factual information. And once we see it, we run with it. So the other myth is once I find that census and I put it on my tree, that is accurate. And most of the time it's not. There's something on there because remember, a lot of it's secondary. It could be tertiary, meaning that a neighbor gave the information. It could be incorrect. So the reliability on the census records is a false security. So
it's a trust but verify sort of thing where it's a starting point. It's never a finish point.
Exactly.
So this one, I'll put you on a spot and see if you can rattle off a www off the top of your head. So is there a website that'll give more information on how to read a census or maybe more general information on it?
Absolutely. My go-to is the Steve Morse website.
Which is?
The stevemorse.org, isn't it?
I don't know. See?
Yes, it is stevemorse.org.
Stevemorse.org.
And Morse is Morse.
Okay, stevemorse.org. And who is Steve Morse?
No idea.
Oh.
His name is Stephen Morse, though.
But he does a whole lot of...
It's online, and he has a wonderful website. It's good for passengerless. It is good for all of the Northeast, especially the New York area. And he has a lot of information so that you can see what all the little codes are on those census records.
Right.
Because there's so many little codes on census records that we overlook. For example, the 1950, the newest one, the 1950 census record has notes that people ignore.
STEVEMORSE.org. And it looks like a massive list of just a bunch of stuff to maybe click on and research.
Yes, but he also tells you what all the codes mean.
That's great.
Because we don't necessarily know the codes. We also can go back and look up the actual instructions.
You mean we as researchers, right?
We as in everyone listening to this podcast.
Well, okay.
They can look up the instructions to the census takers, and that will help them understand what the blanks are for and how to use them and what special codes are on there that they're overlooking.
And then there's also, of course, census.gov.
Census.gov also, sure. And archives.gov is really the one I would go to.
Archives.gov?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. ARCHIVES.gov.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Those are going to be three great resources for.
And I have another one that I want to make sure I mention, and that is the A3 genealogy blog.
Oh, the A3 genealogy. Do tell us about the A3 genealogy blog, Kathleen.
There are a lot of articles on census records and researching and really digging out this little tidbits of things that we might have overlooked.
So probably very, very interesting information that everybody should spend some time digging through.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. On the show. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add about the census? Because I feel much more knowledgeable and I feel I have learned a lot in this session.
Well,
here we go.
I just want to remind people that census records, although the federal census records start with 1790,
right? There
are colonial also records that we should be looking at, especially in Virginia, Louisiana, New York.
And there are census that have been taken in other countries as well.
Absolutely.
So that when you're going to hit a point, since we're primarily immigrants, at a certain point, you're jumping back and you better brush up on your German or your Swedish or whatever.
Yes, I believe the Swedish were one of the first to have census records.
Okay, we're jumping back right now because we're laughing because I had to cut an entire section out that was completely inappropriate for anything that we were talking about. But now we're wrapping up. So I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I do not, John.
Well, that's wonderful because we can get on with the rest of this day. You can get back to your research, which I know you're just dying to jump back into.
Actually, I am.
And we'll catch up again a little bit later. So
all right, love.
Thanks, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, congratulations. You've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for staying. Thanks to Chewy Chewbacca Brent, our part-time AI programmer and full-time cheese tax collector, for his unwavering lack of interest in anything we're doing. The theme song for Hittin the Bricks was written and performed by Tony Fistknuckle and the Rotifers. Watch for their next appearance in Mansfield Park. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and of course Buzzsprout. We'd love to hear what you think about the podcast, so stop by our Facebook page at Hittin the Bricks and let us know.